Okay, it's 4 o'clock. We will get started with the meeting. Ms. Wilson, do we have a confirmation to the notice to the media?
Yes, ma'am, they will.
Thank you. And I do declare that we have a quorum with 4 of the 7 board members present. And now we will need approval of the agenda to get started.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Varner. I'll second Mr. Varner's motion.
Thank you.
Any discussion on the agenda?
You said
Y'all were doing other things. Would you like to second it? No. Well, I think I can, but I'm
You can actually make a motion.
I'm happy for one of y'all to second it instead. Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the agenda? Thank you, that's unanimous. And now we'll move on with the general fund budget discussion. And Dr. Thomas, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Yes, and at this time, I would like to ask Mr. Lawless to share information. We have been going through just the budget planning process, and so Mr. Lawless will share some information regarding what we have thus far with the proposal for the budget, as well as some other information, budget-related information.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Ms. Little, board, thank you for this opportunity to present first reading of this, or first draft of this general fund budget for the upcoming fiscal year. We are optimistic that we've achieved a lot of the goals that we set out. Obviously, there's always room for improvement, so we'll go through what we have. Just as a brief note, we had a budget pretty well drafted, and then Thursday night we had a new iteration of the state information come out and had to spend Friday, working back through that. So this is something that is in flux until the very last minute, but this is the latest information based on where we are right now. What we're presenting to you is a balanced general fund budget for the 22-23 fiscal year that includes $52,849,000 of estimated revenues and expenditures. Now, overall, that budget is about 7% higher than the budget that we're currently operating for, and there's a couple of different reasons for that. The most significant reason is that the state of South Carolina is allocating additional money to public education through the creation of the new funding model, and that's a very welcome change for us. And the second reason is that two of the special revenue funds, that being our Fund 338, which is at-risk student learning funding, and the funding classified as aid to districts, Fund 397, are being rolled up into the general fund. So while those funds were not presented in here last year, it's not really new funds. It was just they were previously restricted. The goals that are achieved by those funds remain the same, but they will now reside in the general fund. So all the expenditures associated with that revenue is included in here now as well. This budget is still subject to change, like I said, and although we've made every effort using the most up-to-date information that we have to minimize any differences between what you're seeing today and what we ask you to approve in June, we are still in flux with the legislature currently being out of session, and that being the single largest source of our revenues. We are optimistic, but we still have to await final numbers from them. So coming out of our planning session that we had last month, I understood the top financial goal for the district was to get everybody that was on a salary scale paid on the correct step. And with the new funding, we have been able to achieve that with this budget. The second objective was to increase pay at each step on the scales, and that goal I would say we partially completed. The state is mandating an 8% increase in the state portion, or the state portion of the hourly schedule for bus drivers. That equates to about a 6% overall increase in bus driver pay per hour, and that is budgeted in this document. The state is also increasing the teacher salary schedule by either 2% according to the Senate's version. I mean, not 2%, $2,000 according to the Senate's version, or $4,000 according to the House version. We have managed to budget for a $2,000 increase to our teacher salary scales in every cell without decreasing the local option if the Senate schedule goes into effect. The understanding is that if you're paying at minimum of $40,000, bachelor's and zero, that you did not have to provide a $4,000 increase under the House version of the salary schedule. So either way, with the increase that we've budgeted, we should be in compliance, provided that they follow through with what they have said regarding the local supplement and maintaining a minimum of $40,000 at each. At bachelor's and zero on the teacher salary scale. Now, we've been told that, but as it currently resides, the House version, and I understand it to be a clerical issue, the person who would have been the person to change that language was new to the job and left it in there. So technically, as it passed the House, it did require a $4,000 increase. If that were to actually come to fruition somehow, which I do not anticipate, that would create problems not only for our district, but many, many districts in the state of South Carolina. So as it stands right now, we are budgeting for a $2,000 increase at every step of the teacher scale. The conference committee that's charged with reconciling the differences between the House and Senate version of the state budget is scheduled to meet tomorrow afternoon. And hopefully they will make quick work of reconciling their differences before the legislature returns to reconvene on June 15th. They're scheduled to come to session June 15th to 17th, and if they still need to come back, they'll be back on the 29th and 30th. So hopefully they'll pass a budget on the 15th between the 15th and 17th, so we'll have some final numbers to go on when we present to you for your approval on June 30th. Again, this is currently a balanced budget, but that's pending any changes that are made to the state level. If anticipated funding goes up or down significantly, we'll have to adjust this document to match that.
Your intent would be to maintain a balanced budget?
Absolutely. Yes. Looking at page 6 of the document that you've got, we've got our general fund revenues. We do anticipate on the local level mostly a moderate increase. County tax revenues we expect to be up a little bit, and we expect that to kind of offset some of the lost revenue in the form of fee in lieu of taxes below what we had previously budgeted. Now, with the increased industrial growth in the county and a lot of the good information we're hearing, we anticipate and hope that those revenues will return to previous levels and beyond in future years, but conservatively estimating, we are planning for a decrease in the coming year. The other sizable change in what we consider local revenue was in actually Medicaid reimbursements. Those used to be significantly larger than we experienced or than we budgeted for in the current year. Due to protocols with the COVID pandemic, we were not able to provide that same level of service to most of our Medicaid students, and so those revenues were way, way down. We budgeted for that decrease. We're starting to see it return now, and so we are budgeting based on the levels that we're collecting currently, and so that's the biggest increase you see excuse me, in the other local revenues. There is a possibility that Medicaid revenues will fall off of this schedule altogether. Some districts consider them local revenues. Some districts consider those to be federal revenues, and we've been told that we can do either. We've always accounted for Medicaid revenues in our general fund, but some of the guidance we're receiving related to the ESSER funding and reporting back for our compliance with that, they want the Medicaid dollars identified in with our federal funds. So it's possible that at some point we'll end up creating a separate fund to account for Medicaid revenues and the expenditures that we pay for with Medicaid revenues. But that would be a net zero effect overall to the district's financials, but it would remove that $375,000 from the general fund if that were to happen.
Hey, Ms. Ware. Good, how are you?
The biggest change overall in general fund revenues are in the funds that come to us through the South Carolina Department of Education. And the changes through the new funding model makes comparison on a line-by-line basis of those revenues almost meaningless. The big takeaway, though, is that the district is expecting to receive increased funding from the new funding model, and the question is just a matter of how much. We're currently, this budget is prepared using the House version of that, which to us is slightly less money than we would receive under the Senate's version. So we're trying to be conservatively estimated in our revenues. And also remember that part of the increase in the general fund revenues is not so much an actual increase in revenues as much as it is a reclassification of special revenue funds to the general fund. Our revenues from federal sources for the general fund are fairly immaterial. We don't really anticipate any major changes there. If you flip over to page 8, you'll see the breakdown between state, local, and federal. Clearly the state's the largest portion of our funding, and as a matter of fact, of that $4.6 million that is considered other, 4.1 million of that is actually derived from state revenues as well. It just kind of falls into this category of special revenue. So the state is far and away the biggest source of our funding in the district.
Mr. Lawless, on the local revenues, have you already had those conversations with the county regarding any changes that they may see coming?
For the property taxes?
Yes.
Those are projected just based on a rolling 12-month period, and they grow generally fairly steadily from year to year. Right now, we're at about $11.7 million in a rolling basis. If our June collections come in like at least as much as June last year, we should be budgeted.
I'm just curious that, our actual that we had from a couple of years ago, whenever the ending of, in 21, the actual there was 12.6 million. So it's quite a bit higher than what you have budgeted here, by the way.
There was a revenue misclassification.
Okay,
That
so
year.
that should have an
It was
asterisk.
another category of revenue, but it was in total correct. That line item is not where that should have gone. I went back and reviewed that after the fact.
Makes it hard to see a history when you have a lot of shell game type stuff like that.
I wouldn't categorize it as that term, but yes, sir, I understand that. Any other questions on the revenue side of the budget before we move on? Okay. All right.
So
Look at
in general,
page-
before we leave there,
Sure.
sorry, taking me a little bit, or kind of take it all in. So in general, we see our income, or revenues, if you will, going up by about 3.4 million from last year, budgeted wise.
General fund, yes. Most of that increase is an actual funding increase through some anticipated revenue increases, mainly from the state. Part of it is taking previously restricted funds, and now they're saying, just add that money to your general fund. You're going to receive at least enough to cover what you received in the prior year, and it's going to come to you in the form of general funds.
Okay.
The way we budget that, those at-risk fundings primarily with salaries, and so that's included in the big bump you'll see in the salary figures. It also included some supplies and things. So while and we'll kind of touch on that when we look at the expenditure side. Sometimes what looks like an increase in one line item might not be an increase. It might be an actual decrease because it's something that we previously budgeted in larger amounts in a previous fund.
Okay.
But those roll-ups do make it a little bit more confusing when you just look at it on a year-to-year comparison basis. All right, so if you look at page 9, that is a chart that has been in the budget document for a long time. And it's the base student cost. And the base student cost has been a bone of contention in the state of South Carolina for some time. Many in my seat at other districts would say, well, they've never funded it according to the EFA model, which factually is true. But what that doesn't take into consideration was that they did create all those other funds, the 338s and the other EIA funds, that kind of offset that. But the old funding model was built around that base student cost and your weighted pupil units as a percentage of the state's total weighted pupil units and your index of tax-paying ability. That's a fight we don't have to fight after this year. The base student cost is gone. It does not exist in the new funding model. So the money that we receive will be distributed based on what the people in Columbia refer to as a simpler method. I've kind of seen the mathematics behind it. I don't really think it's simpler, but if it makes them feel better about the way they're doling it out and we get more money as a result, I'm not going to complain. So this should be the last time you see a chart with the base student cost on it.
So no more at all, no more House, no more Senate, no nothing?
Whoa. The base student cost, and that's just one component in the EFA funding model. So there will still be a separate version coming out of the House and a separate version coming out of the Senate. That's just one thing they won't be talking about anymore.
What's the eliminated mean on the top of that?
That
That
means
they're
that
not doing it
they've done away
Okay,
with
so
it.
that's what you mean by
After
eliminated.
21-22, the new funding model does not include a component called the base student cost.
Okay.
And so that's
Is it useful to track for us just to see?
well, it goes away, so there's nothing else to track after the 21-22 year.
Okay.
I would say if you look at total state funding, that is probably the most meaningful thing you're going to get, because other than that, sometimes they'll give you funding and they'll specify it for a certain use. Well, if that alleviates your strain on the general fund, well, that's a good thing. If it doesn't, sometimes they might tell us that we have to pay for something without giving us money to pay for it. That's happened before as well. But in this case, overall for District 55, I think the new budget is a good thing. Now, I would like to get a little bit more. I would have loved to have seen a little more come out of it. I was a little happier when I had prepared my documents under the Senate version of the budget, but when the House estimates came out, they were less, and I don't feel comfortable preparing a budget based on the larger amount and hope for the best. I would rather plan for the worst and hope for some additional funding. And if that happens, we've got the priorities already in place, what we want to do with it if and when it comes. Looking at page 10, you've got our 10-year enrollment trends. As you can see, we've got a slow but steady decline. The last time we actually increased in enrollment in District 55 was in the 14-15 fiscal year, or school year. That decline accelerated last year. We kind of stabilized, but really did not regain as many as we had lost. So that's a trend that we hope is stabilizing with some of the growth that we're anticipating in the district. But you can see that we have lost a significant number of students in the last 10 years.
Let's talk about this page for just a minute. We've recently had many discussions on the new developments coming in, how many students that will add to our schools, that the schools are busting at the seams, we don't have room for any additional students. But we don't have any less space than we had in 2015, and we're at 650 less students.
That's
So why are we busting at the seams if we have 650 less students, but we don't have one more desk to put a new student in?
Well, and when those comments were made, it wasn't necessarily across the board at every school. So we have some schools that are very full, and then we do have other schools where there's additional space. So it really all depends where we really have the influx in enrollment. For example, Gray Court, and we did a visit there. Gray Court is one where we anticipate that there will be some additional enrollment. And that is one of our schools where we do have a hard time trying to find additional space. So it really just depends on where the increase is going to occur and what schools, which is also a reason for the facility studies that we're currently doing, that hopefully we will get some additional information that can help guide us to be able to tell us what those projections may be and the needs at each school.
Do we have the breakdown, do we have this breakdown by school?
I do, on the following page, the 2021, or 21-22.
I'm talking about for each year.
I do not have
Or
it.
to go back and compare it to, say, 2015, the 14-15 year, which was the highest year.
I do not have it with me. I can get it.
Okay.
We have the reports for the 135-day, 190-day back for years, but we can put something together to show growth by school or decrease of growth by school.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, and maybe that will be in the report that you guys are pulling together, or waiting to get back.
And we did have to give them enrollment data for several, I think it was 7 years back. So they have collected that, so I know that's also included in their report and anticipated growth too. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right, looking at the expenditure side of our budget on page 12, and you'll see the largest increases there, again, are in salaries and related fringe benefits. And other than pay increases, other than that increase in the amount an individual is receiving in the form of pay increase, that also does include the rolling of the people who were previously paid in and currently paid in Fund 338 at-risk funding into the general fund. So those, like I said, that number does include a $2,000 raise for teachers. It includes catching up all employees that are on a salary schedule to the correct level on that schedule. And it includes approximately 6% overall in bus driver steps on an hourly basis. And for employees that are not on the salary schedule, it includes a 3% raise. The cost of group health and life insurance is scheduled to increase by 18%, beginning at the first of the calendar year. And funding to cover part of that increase is included in the additional state revenues.
That was what I was actually gonna do a little math on it. Does it look like the group health and life went up disproportionately high?
Oh, yeah. I mean, 18%, that's a chunk.
It is, yeah.
So, but it's only for half of this fiscal year, or half of the next fiscal year. They do their increases at like a January. It's a calendar year. So half of the year's increase, I anticipated that one hit costs us about $500,000.
How often is that program, as far as our health and life insurance, how often is that reviewed to see if there's better plans or options out there? Is that on some sort of schedule?
It's a state plan anyway.
This is PBA. This is
Oh,
just
yeah.
And
public
there's
employee
no
benefit.
options, that's just it?
I'm not aware of a school district having flexibility to choose a plan outside of
Okay,
the state plan.
so they just have us at their fingertips.
Basically.
Mr. Lawless, you mentioned, obviously, we talked about teacher salaries and bus driver salaries. We've discussed those multiple times recently, but we've also talked a little bit about those in the nutrition area. Is there any opportunity on that side?
Yes, ma'am. I was going to get to that, but I can go ahead and.
Oh, you can
While
keep going in order, sorry, didn't mean to jump ahead.
Well, it's a pullout regardless, so I'll go ahead and mention it because they're not
Okay.
included in the general fund. The USDA funds the food
Oh,
service.
sorry about that.
And so, well, we were going to touch on it anyway, so we'll go ahead and touch on it now. It's just as good a time. Food service is not included in the general fund because it's a federally funded program. It's
Okay.
self-sustaining. And Wanda Knight, our director, does a fantastic job of managing that program, and she has built in approximately 5% into her salary schedules for her managers and her operators. And of course, that's based on the size, the number of meals they serve, how long they've been there. But across the board, she's been able to budget in about 5%. They had been frozen for a long time. She was not competitive with districts around us, so that made some headway. And I think that's something that we're glad to be able to provide to them. So in addition to that, they've been held behind on their salary steps, so we'll already be paying the steps, and in addition to that, their step, she was able to budget in 5%.
Okay, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, we've talked about the pay increases, the increased cost of the group health and life insurance, and the fact that the state partially funded that increase with additional revenue. The increased cost in the cost of the employer retirement, that's only a 1% increase. The employer or the district pays 22.81% of an employee's salary currently in the form of retirement. That goes up to 23.81, and that goes into effect July 1. So that the retirement runs on the fiscal year. The Social Security costs increase directly with the salary increases, and they're about 7.65% of the taxable portion of the salary. So that just goes up in relation to the salary itself. We are seeing some increases in our contracted services, and those would be the spending categories that are prefixed with a 300 level object. A lot of that is for our substitute teachers. Most of those go through a service. A lot of that, the increase goes toward substitutes because the service that we're currently using, or the service that we are switching to, supposedly boasts a much higher rate of filling those positions, and so we've tried to budget for what we anticipate in increased spending on substitute teachers. It's also increasingly difficult to attract and retain custodians at our facilities. And when we're unable to fill those positions, we reach out to a company called MSI, which is our contractor that provides custodial services at our schools. So as we're not able to fill positions, more and more of those dollars end up going to that service. And so we're trying to budget for those as well.
Is that a local service? Like, is that in Lawrence County?
MSI is not out of Lawrence. They are out of upstate South Carolina, but I'm not positive. They work with other districts as well.
Okay. And I don't know what the per hourly rate difference is, but say we paid someone locally to be a custodian versus going through this company, but we paid them the same that we would have paid the company, would we be able to keep local people employed and the money in the county?
That's a difficult question to answer. In some cases, we've had people that really want it because of the benefits associated with it. In many of our hourly pay positions, the benefits that a person receives for working at the school district are at least as important as the salary they receive.
Right.
So the way that we bill, the way that we are billed for custodial services is not itemized on a person by person basis. They flat rate our fee based on the needs of the facility. So unless we have an actual direct one-to-one swap, we really don't know the actual cost. We don't know what they pay that person. They give us a flat dollar amount. This is what it would cost for us to service Ford Elementary School, for instance. Now, as we are able to, when they've had issues and are trying to hire somebody to fill the position, we kind of renegotiate or whatever and tell them we no longer need that. But for the most part, most of our facilities are either serviced by MSI or they're serviced by our people. And so it's not we don't have a lot of situations other than, I think we have some at the high school, but we don't have a whole lot of situations where we have both in the same facility. I don't think that really answers your question, but.
It did. That's
What,
okay.
no, and I think that it will help. I think it'll help our case that we are now caught up on steps, because while it's an hourly scale, the custodians have been held back based on years of service. So we're moving them forward 3 steps from where they are currently to where they will be. So that's a sizable increase in the hourly rate, which will help to retain. And then we also, if we receive additional funding and are able to add back to those other pay schedules, they would receive that as well. Obviously, the more we offer, the more we pay, the more competitive we are. But I don't think that every bit of the problems with attracting and retaining is pay related.
Sure, I
Some of it's
understand.
management related.
So does this company, the individuals that are employed by this company to be custodians in the schools, do those individuals live in Lawrence?
I really can't answer that. I don't deal very directly with the contract. But
In some cases, they do, and not in all cases. And I know from actually speaking to the contract service personally, they also struggle with actually recruiting and retaining the personnel. So it's not just us, but even with the contract service company, they're also going through some of those same struggles with being able to find and keep personnel as well. So it's kind of a universal problem right now.
I can understand that. I was just trying to figure out, how can we employ people from Lawrence County and have those salaries and those monies come back to Lawrence County versus wherever this company is
Some of our own
housed. So,
employees have been employed by them. But in
Yeah.
talking to you before, Jim, we've talked about this. I used to be a stickler for this particular thing. It was always cheaper to contract out because we didn't have to worry about insurance and all those other things for them. But I always had a problem because we had to get the supplies. That was one of my biggest beefs. We have to provide supplies to them.
we provide supplies
Yeah.
for the facility, not for the people.
But the people really, do they get, each school gets supplies the same amount every month, even when they're not in there as often? And we do
No.
have some people in the schools during the day, and I don't know if they're our people or their people, but I know the contract people come in at night, a lot of the times, after hours. But we have 1 or 2 there, like somebody's there early
Yes,
and
ma'am.
leaves at some point in time, then others come in and stay till another time or at the end, so
Part of, when we purchase our custodial supplies,
I always had a problem with that.
Part of-
paying them
part of-
extra money.
our custodial supplies are purchased from a contractor that provides consulting services as a part of that. So they manage the inventory. They come in, I think it's on a monthly basis, and look at what's on hand, and from that, they've evaluated the facility to know how much of a particular chemical we should be using, for instance. So they can determine whether we are overusing, whether we're not using enough to utilize the facility, the chemicals according to the prescribed plan. So the inventory of that is managed, so it's not, we don't receive just a certain amount. They're only giving us what we need, but they're managing the inventory levels and consulting with our custodial staff, be it our employees or a contractor, on how to use the supplies appropriately to achieve the level of cleanliness that we require. So the supplies are really it's a separate conversation there.
I know, but still, for this kind of money that we're paying them, I think that, I still think sometimes they order oversupply because we're not in the schools as much in the summer as we are during during the full year.
We pay a flat rate per month, and then that is kind of trued up at the end of a year. So while we were shut down, we were using significantly less, and because we did that, we were able to maintain a level amount of spending, although our consumption increased greatly when we got back. So it's kind of like when you have the bill leveling with your utility bills. Sometimes people have a service with a utility company where they pay the same thing every month, and if there's savings, it reduces what they pay the following year. If there's an overage, you can usually spread it out over the course of the next year, and we do that with our custodial supplies.
And normally it's an hourly rate, but I often wonder about that because sometimes people can come in and whiz through and be just kind of wonder about the cleanliness of the schools, and I've heard some of your principals and all, so they go in and have to go in a little early sometimes to do it. They're early, some of them are early anyway, but they're doing some of that labor as well. So, you know, that being said, shouldn't be, but it exists.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it exists.
So the flat rate that's paid, you said it's paid every month and that trues up at the end of the year. Is that regardless of how many times they come in and clean? I mean, is there a set schedule that pay covers?
I
No,
think
sir,
the
we-
flat rate is for cleaning supplies, and you're talking about people, right?
I'm just talking about the service as a whole, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, and they're both relatively flat rated, but yeah, it should be based on the number of people that are serving the school.
Okay. What? I mean,
Sometimes they do
What I-
sometimes if we have a particular need,
Yeah,
because we employ so many, they might throw an extra person in there for a week and not increase our rate. Right, you know, if it's and then sometimes if we had, and they worked with us like with, through the pandemic, when we had people that would be out due to COVID, they billed us separately for those, so that we could account for what did it cost us directly related to a COVID substitute. And those funds, we should be able to move back over and receive reimbursement through ESSER to cover that increased cost. So they kind of work with us to provide the management on the level of staffing, but our principals at the end of the day have charge over how many people are in their building.
So how many people do we contract through the company versus hire on our own?
I really have no idea. I don't handle the staffing of custodians.
so
I don't,
the cleaning services budget line here, does that just cover the labor?
Yeah, well, some of our schools we allow the schools to budget within their facility.
Okay.
Some of them consider that to be a repair and maintenance service, and some of them consider it to be a cleaning service. So between that level 322 and 323, that MSI bill gets kind of lumped in. Depending on which facility you're looking at, they categorize it differently. So it's kind of both of those.
So it could possibly be more than what's on line 322.
Well, I know that some of it is included in 323.
Do we have, increase in any, it might be a capital need, but just because of the aging of the building, you know, and it's kind of harder to keep up, do we have an increase in like repairs and maintenance there?
Yeah, so we look at when we're allocating
That
out,
taken into
when we do the allocation for O&M expenditures, we'll factor in, part of it you could essentially allocate out based on a per student, because a student count, it kind of equates to the cost of or to the size of a facility. But we know that we have certain buildings that are of a certain age that do require additional funding, and we take that into account.
Why would all the schools not report it the same?
The same, yeah. If it's cleaning, why is it not reported as cleaning? Why are we roping in two different budget lines as the same service, just at different schools?
It just hasn't been a priority to force them to change the way they do that. But if I can make that happen.
Well, so if it's happening there, is it happening in other areas in the budget too?
Not in a material way, no. Just for instance, if somebody does a repair on a facility, a small repair, some of them might call it a repair and maintenance, and some of them might call it an O&M supply. You know, they're both O&M. It both falls under the same function category, but this is the object category, and so there is some inconsistency between whether something falls into 300s or whether it's the 400s, which is supplies.
and there's actually a process where, if the principals may have some additional, funding in the cleaning or in repairs and maintenance, there's a process where they can ask to transfer those funds because they have this repair that they need at the school. And so they're able to submit that to the business office and to me to be able to make that shift if it's needed because of a certain need at the school.
Right, at the facility level, we do give them flexibility to do net zero reclassifications of expenditures depending on their actual need at the time.
So I noticed, we've got the budget split a couple of different ways. I think these are the, I forget what you call them, but the 3-digit objects, and then I guess on in another place they're under the function. Do we also have it per facility? Or do we budget to the facility level?
Yes.
I mean, I would
Yes, we
expect
do.
the principals to have to. I haven't seen any of that at the facility level shared at all. I don't know if it helps. To me, I think one of the things do we have a school that is less efficient, if you will, or more efficient? What can we learn from one facility to the other?
We do location reporting to the state annually. So the state monitors, do we spend equitably between our facilities? That's something that we're required to do. So that's something that we're already doing. Just to explain briefly how our account structure goes. There's fund, function, object, modifier, and location. Okay, so an account number, which would be an example, that would be on your revenue schedule, right? Because there's few enough revenue line items that we kind of show those. So that if you look at that revenue schedule, the first 3 digits before the dash is our fund.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not a 100, it's not general fund, so it's not included in this budget. The function, which in the case of a revenue is not as meaningful, but in an expenditure account, that second 3 digits is going to be, that's your function. So a 100 level function is instructional. A 200 level was like supervisory. So there's various functions within that, and it kind of breaks it down by the function of your organization. The object, a 100 is the third group. A 100 object is salaries. A 200 object is benefits. A 300 object is purchase services. A 400 object is supplies. A 500 object is something capital related. 6 is other, and 7 only gathers like indirect costs. So I mean, but the big ones, 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, gathers the vast majority of what occurs in the general fund budget. All right. Well, the only other, the biggest big ticket item on there is the energy and utilities. We're not really budgeting an increase there, and the reason being that we are currently in the process of doing LED upgrades in 4 of our facilities, and we are optimistic that the savings from that upgrade will pay for any anticipated increases in rate or usage in the coming year. Those are relatively stable from year to year anyway. But when we finish that project, we should experience less usage, and that covers the high school is one of the 4, and so that's the big one anyway. But we're doing that at the high school, Ford, Gray Court, and Hickory Tavern, I believe, and there's the Duke Power schools. There were additional rebates that made that a very worthwhile project.
Our energy costs mostly electricity. We have very little natural gas and water.
Yeah, most of our units, most of our buildings are heated with the BART units, and they're all electric. All right. So, other than the ones we've talked about, most of the items are changed. But keep in mind that with the inflationary environment that we see, if you see 0 change, that's probably a cut in the actual purchasing power of our dollar. So we are going to tighten our belts and just make it work to achieve the other goals that we have set out. If you look over it on page 14, that's a breakdown of on the pie chart of how we budget out our expenditures. And Mr. Varner, those categories that you see there, that's those objects we're talking about. Your salaries are 100s, benefits are 200s, purchase services 300s, supplies and materials are 400s generally, and then your others be your 600s. Or anything that's not one of the others. I mean, you see it's a very small amount. So if you look at the way we have that broken out, about 90% of what we pay out is related to the people. So when we start talking about how we're spending money in our facilities, the things that are kind of discretionary, it's really only about 10% of the budget that we, you buy fewer of these, we need more of these. Okay, so the biggest impact is in our people, and our personnel changes make the biggest impact to the budget. For one thing, if the fringe cost of an employee adds significantly to the cost of a position. So it's much beyond what the employee sees in the form of a salary. They don't see how much the district has to pay for health insurance for them, for instance, and it's a large number. They see that $355 or whatever they pay each month, and that is not a drop in the bucket to what it actually costs to provide health insurance to those individuals. And because of the human aspect of those expenditures, it makes it's even more critical that we try to right-size those decisions, and because it goes way beyond dollars and cents when you start talking about the people involved in the lives that are impacted by the staffing. All right, as we move.
So on this particular list, you have salaries and benefits listed out at 59% and 29%. What's the breakdown of those versus that are actually school related versus district office related?
I don't have that in front of me.
Okay.
And you would have to define school related, because there's administration at
I mean,
various levels.
literally the school buildings versus this building.
Okay, we can get you that. I don't have it with me. You want to know what amount of this is inside of this building?
Right.
All right. And would that be the people who are based in this building who actually provide their services in the schools, or are you talking about like purely administration?
Purely administration.
Okay. So like a psychologist, for instance, whose office is here but meets with students at a school, for instance.
Right, because they would have direct contact with if someone's not directly interfacing with a student, that's the number that I'm looking for in this building.
Okay.
That's kind of the same line of question I was thinking is by facility. You could based here, based at Gray Court, based at Hickory Tavern, and I know it muddies up a little bit, but.
Okay, so to back up to my explanation of the account structures, so after the object, the next 4 digits are modifiers. That's anything we want it to be that's meaningful to us. It might be 2021 for a 2021 school year, or whatever. The last 2 digits of that is location.
Okay.
All right, so each school has a location. The vast majority of the people who work in that facility, they are coded to that. So for people like myself who are here and purely administrative, I'm a location 00. That's district-wide, and those expenditures get allocated out essentially to the district as a whole. So there are people here in this building whose location might be 00, and it's because they provide services to various schools. So, like directly at various schools.
So the psychologist, you're saying they're, they might be coded for the district office, but yet they split their time between Sanders and the high school.
Right, they would be assigned a certain, but they may very well be coded to the district office, and that's why I was clarifying. Do you want to know? And so you gave me additional information. You want to know if they have direct student contact, you're not considering that to be a DO employee, even though they come here every day and this is where they start and stop.
Right, but they spend the majority of their day with students, right?
Presumably.
Yes, no?
I don't manage them. I have a very
Yes,
small department.
that's correct.
I have have a small department and we hide in our windowless suite.
We need you to branch out a little bit.
Yeah. There's enough going on in my little department to keep me busy. But we can get you that information as well.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace.
Okay. All right, so looking at the various, after the pie chart of expenditures, we have the various salary schedules. And besides the changes on the bus driver schedule and the teacher schedule, the biggest thing that we did this year was to stretch all of our schedules out to 30 years. All right, and what that really does is it more accurately reflects how we operate. Because when we had a person to hit the top of their scale, we didn't actually freeze. We kind of gave them a percentage increase to kind of represent what they would have gotten if the schedule went further. And so by stretching these out to 30 years, we take a lot of people who have manually calculated salaries and we'll be placing them on a schedule. We have a lot of teachers between 23 and 30 years, but not as many once they pass 30. So this will, which is music to my department's ears because we're the ones who have to do those manual calculations and update all those each year. So, but we've done that not only with the teachers, but with all of our other schedules as well.
Did we smooth out all the steps too?
We can't smooth out the steps because the state is the biggest portion and their schedule is not level.
Okay, so they go steady for a while and they take a little jump and then go steady?
I got a little background on that.
Yeah.
So apparently at some point in the past, the state decided they wanted to raise what a starting teacher made.
Yeah.
Now from what I heard, now that's just hearsay, but from what I heard, when they said, well, if we increase this starting pay to X and then carry that through the schedule, it's a massive, massive number. Mm-hmm. But they still wanted to increase what people got at the bottom. And so you'll see they have a good salary and a tiny, tiny, tiny increase, and then it balloons again. And from what I understand, that was what happened. It was because of the way they wanted to incentivize people to go into education. But once they got them, they were okay. But then once you hit about year 5 or 6, then we really need to reward you again. But because the lion's share of what we pay those teachers is based on the state minimum schedule, we can't smooth that out with local.
Okay.
It's too big.
There was also an error in one of these that I pointed out.
Sir,
Did you fix that one?
It was fixed. It was correct. We were paying them correctly. It was a typo.
Yeah, it was just, sorry. I didn't know if I needed to go through them again for you.
I am fallible, and you are welcome to go through it again. And if you could do it preferably before the June 30 meeting, I will have it correct in the document.
Yeah, this week.
All right, Mr. Lewis, I have a question. Well, first a statement. It's interesting. I'm glad that you pointed out that you've increased the schedules to go up to 30 years, because I just had somebody ask me about that the other day, saying that we only go up to 22 years and Greenville goes up to 33 years, and why is that? And we get capped out. But it sounds like even if someone had reached that point, you were still actually paying them like an increase beyond that 22-year mark. It just wasn't reflected on this paper.
That's correct. And and honestly, I thought that I was surprised fairly recently when I heard, well, we lose people because they can go somewhere else and get additional steps. And I said, I thought everybody.
That's what I
thought
heard
everybody
as well.
knew that we continued to do percentage raises after, but apparently that was not the case.
Yeah.
So now that's why I'm saying this really reflects what we were already doing, but it puts it in writing, and like I said, it really makes things a whole lot easier in my department. Not this year, but next year it'll be a lot easier.
So on the teacher salary specifically,
Yes, ma'am.
we have increased all the steps to catch everybody up on this schedule. Is that right? Based on what you said earlier? Okay.
Yes.
And does this include the 3% that you mentioned that everybody would get, or no?
It's not 3% in addition. So
Okay.
we were weighing two options. One was increasing the teacher scale 3%, and the other was doing it 2,000. And we ended up going with increasing 2,000, and there were a couple of reasons for that. Number one, Not that we're in direct competition, but that our neighbors next door in District 56, that was the methodology that they used.
Right, okay.
But really the more important reason was that we based this on the Senate scale, which was a $2,000 increase. So they increased 2,000, we increased 2,000, and under the Senate version, we maintain our local supplement, right? So the Senate version, the starting pay right now for bachelor's and zero is 36,000. So under the Senate version, it goes to 38,000, and we would be paying 41,056. So the difference there is the local portion of the salary. So if what comes out of the final salary schedule is in accordance with the Senate version, then we have maintained local. If they do the House version or they meet in the middle and do 3, then our local supplement will be reduced somewhat to accommodate for that. The funding is what the funding is, and we've provided as much as we can fund with what we're doing, and it keeps us competitive with the districts around us.
Okay, so
So-
this catches everybody up on their step.
Yes, ma'am. The
that
teachers
we've
were
been
one step
behind.
behind.
And then the aides were what, 2 steps behind?
They were 2
maybe?
behind. So a teacher, going from what they're currently making to next year, a teacher will move 2 steps up the scale if provided they've got enough years of service to be advanced. An aide, for instance, has been 2 years behind, so from what they're making now to what they'll make will be 3 steps,
Okay.
okay?
And then anyone that's not on a salary schedule,
About 3%.
they would get 3%.
Yeah.
Okay.
That
With the
kinda-
exception of the bus drivers, because you said that was
With the,
different.
right, and they like the teachers. The state only issues a couple of mandatory salary schedules. And in both cases, the vast majority of districts pay in excess of that state amount. So for our bus drivers, you see, I think the salary schedule's back here. Our local supplement is we pay, well, that's actually an interesting one to look at. So if you'd like to look at page 24. We paid $3.50 an hour beyond what the state did. But the state scale stops at 22 years. They didn't even go to the 23, it's like 22 plus. So at $13.41 an hour, the state's no longer telling you how much in excess of that you have to pay. So that on our schedule, when we dragged it out to 30, that state portion stays the same at $13.41 because it's locked. But in order to keep providing increases out to year 30, you see the burden for that is 100% local, the burden for that additional increase. Again, that reflects what we were already doing. If we had a bus driver that had worked 23 years or 24 years, we weren't paying them at the top of their scale. We had given them a percentage increase to reflect that. So, but this kind of shows you, because it's actually broken out between state and local, you can kind of see how that works. We've always supplemented at $3.50 an hour, plus that increase beyond the state minimum, and you can see that reflected in that bus schedule.
And the food service schedule reflects what Ms. Knight was able to
Correct, and I believe
negotiate.
she was she was able to do 5% on hers, but she was, from what she told me, she, comparing to other districts around her, was way behind, way below, and so she needed to do something a little beyond an inflation adjustment to her schedule.
The experience, is that hours, driving hours, is that what that is?
For
For
a bus driver?
Sorry, no.
Back to the buses?
I was looking at food service manager, sorry.
Yeah, it should be a year of service, a school year of service.
Gotcha.
And the numbers at the top of hers, from what I understand, that's like the number of meals served.
Okay,
That means
okay,
something.
that's what I was
That means a
trying
lot
to
to
figure out.
Wanda. It means a
Okay.
lot to food service.
Okay.
But her scale is based on, essentially that equates to the size of the school, but I mean, I suppose, some schools may have more partaking in cafeteria versus brought from home lunches, but her schedule is based on what they anticipate them serving.
Okay.
So we've scheduled, so all and she was able to, she pulled hers only out to 20 years. She said she really doesn't have anybody in her manager group that is beyond 20 years. So it would just be a theoretical exercise to pull it out further than that. Although she She did do it on the operators and assistants, assistant cashiers, because she has, that's a typo. She has some that are beyond that schedule, so, but for everything else that we've done, we've pulled it out 30 years, and that just kinda, for somebody who started working with the district, that kinda gets them into retirement years where they're able to draw retirement if they so choose, so that, that'll significantly reduce the number of people where we're manually calculating an hourly or daily or annual salary, and really codifies it into a schedule.
Did you get the date up there? Is that what you picked up on 22?
No, I got the misspelling of cashier on 23.
Page 22 is 21, 22.
Yep. Thank you.
Page 17 is the same way.
Huh?
Page 17 is the same way.
I will,
22.
I will gladly spend a portion of my day tomorrow correcting typos. If you spot any more, just shoot me an email or
Will do.
text, and I'll be glad to address them directly.
Is
The
easy.
first one I noticed was in the summarized budget. I had the wrong years on there, and I was like, oh man, I hope this isn't the way this meeting's gonna go. But I appreciate your cooperation, proofreading.
Cold eyes review.
You know what? My eyes were not cold at the time. All right. So again, we've pulled all the salaries out out to 30 years, all the schedules out, and in my mind, that is a tremendous improvement. I don't know if everybody appreciates it as much as I do, but I see the effects of it. So, and then looking at the supplement schedule, I know that's one that everybody loves
It's a fun one.
to look at.
Easy target.
Our payroll, I sent someone from payroll, and we have a representative from HR get together to go through everything that's being paid currently in supplements, what we anticipate for the following year. They've worked with the high school athletic department and the various administrators at the schools to create a list that we believe to be complete. So this will be how we anticipate spending a salary dollar. One of the things that we took off the schedule was the National Board supplement. That's really not a supplement. I mean, it's not, that is no more supplemental than the local portion of a teacher's salary that we budget. I mean, if a teacher attains National Board certification, it's just like if they attain a master's degree. They get that pay increase. We have to give it. It doesn't matter. This board and I, neither one have the discretion to withhold that. So that one was removed.
So we are finally at a clean list, and all of these positions are being paid.
That is, well, Renee, were they all paid? Or, I believe that it is either they are paid or anticipate being paid. Like, they may not be currently doing it this second, but they anticipate it.
So we could put a name by every one of these.
Well, that's what I was gonna
Yeah.
ask. I
Right.
would like to either see a name by it or a description by it,
I
cause
don't
I get
think we
so
can.
confused about that.
I don't think we can put that in this document. This
Good.
this
Well, we don't have
document's
to have a
posted
name, but I
online.
would like a description of what they're doing, cause when I see like Prep Academy Supervisor, I was thinking that was what Dr. Fulton was doing anyway, so I just didn't understand the supplement. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I just had questions like that come to mind, and I just wasn't sure how that goes.
Right. Well, there was still also a supplement that was included with that, for that role. And so, we can definitely get the information, but this is for the 22-23 school year. So, we may not necessarily have names for all of these yet, because they have not been filled, but these are
Well,
all
at
the
least a
ones that we.
description of the job. That's all I'm asking. Like nurses coordinator, you have one nurse to coordinate off of all the nurses. Is that person an RN or an OPN or just, I don't know how that works. I
Okay.
just didn't
We
know.
can definitely get a description.
Thank you. That
And
helps me a whole lot.
I know
It really
athletic
does.
trainer is a hot discussion, but we have listed here an assistant trainer and a student athletic trainer coordinator. What are those two roles?
Near the
It's on
bottom.
the first
Yes.
page, page 26, all the way at the bottom.
And I'll speak to that while you're
The student
looking for
athletic
it.
trainer coordinator is the one that actually teaches that class, and they supervise those kids while they're providing those services to the athletics.
So the teacher of sports medicine is that person too? Okay. Right, right. Okay, I was just wondering who who that person was. And then the assistant trainer, we don't have an assistant trainer, do we? Okay.
Why is there a, admin assistant at Waterloo, but none of the other elementary schools or middle schools?
Waterloo does not have an assistant principal.
Gotcha.
Did we decide, and I'm sorry if I haven't, my eyes haven't fallen over here, but did we decide to do away with the ladies' club and gentlemen's club and those facilitators?
In that capacity, that is something that we don't own the rights to the curriculum. And so we are going to do another route where we also offer some mentoring and some services
I thought that was
for-
gifted to us
for WOW.
for just a year. Okay. Okay. All right.
There was something in the other one about fall league coordinator, we took that out of here.
These are the ones that we are planning
Yeah,
for
like I said, if I had a
22, 23.
description, I could better understand it versus just seeing an AD, that's not a thing, and I don't have to have a name, just a description.
Okay. We can do that.
Oh, and archery coaches, it says there's 8. Do we offer that at all the elementary and middle schools? Is that where that 8 comes from?
We try to fund it, and we can find the coach that actually offer it, and do, a lot of times we can find the coach that offer it.
Now where you see 8, I thought I see 1 in this.
Well, so
page
on the
27.
first page, elementary and middle, there's a, the
Elementary and
other
middle.
page you're looking at should be high school.
It's secondary, okay.
Okay. And how is it, would it be possible that once all your positions are filled and determined and the budget is set based on the State House making a decision on something, can we go through here and, just like this blue highlight the ones that we are paying versus the ones that we're not paying, so we know, that's money that anytime we see that you can use for something else in the future or during the year if you've never found that person.
There should be relatively few of those, because we ask them to clean, like, if we're not doing this, take it off. So if it's not currently being done, or they don't anticipate it in the 22-23 year, it's not there.
And supplements would fall under your,
It would be,
Hundred-
it's a salary component, it's not.
okay, so it is buried in other places.
It's included in salary, with the rare exception that we have an individual who is not a district employee, and the only thing they do is provide a supplemental service, and we don't have very much of that at all in District 55. Some districts do a good bit of it, but we don't. Then that would probably fall, that would be in a 300 category, it would go under athletics and the function, and then the 300.
But most of it shows up at 100.
Well, and then if it's our supplements, they come with increased FICA taxes, they come with increased retirement, so it shows up in 100s, 200 options.
Ms. Ware, the fall summer league coordinator is still listed under secondary athletic
That's
supplements.
what I was showing her
page
that,
26.
Thomas, and,
Yeah, so
she,
what is that for?
It has to do with just the athletic supplements with helping to coordinate those. So we'll provide a description of each of these
and that
so that,
would definitely help better explain, like I said, I could understand that.
Would we have something similar for the esports or are we getting involved, or maybe that's
And I wondered about
somewhere
that
else?
being in there too, 'cause we talked
Yeah,
about it,
we
you know,
talked
they
about that
come
with
and
PC.
present, so that would be good.
Right,
too.
well, and we actually, currently have it happening, at the high school.
Mhm.
So we have a team already that has been already in progress with that.
Are they listed on there? Or are we gonna?
One would think that it'd be listed as a line item
It's not on here.
I'll check on that to see if they received a supplement, and if so, how much, and where it would fall in here.
Okay, we ready to move forward?
I think so. Thank you.
Okay, and then the last item, in this document is the projection of how the district plans to spend the capital portion of the next bond issue. This fall, when we do our issue, we are anticipating having approximately $3.3 million available to be used for capital projects. Like we've said many times before, the biggest area of need here is roofing. And after the projects that are listed here are completed, the next big item for roofing is the pods at the high school. That is an estimated $4 million project in and of itself. It'll have to be done in phases, obviously hitting the worst, if we can define that, worst areas first. But in the coming year, the biggest project would be Sanders. If you recall, last year when we did the budget, we were awaiting our roofing survey, and so there was a big line item that just said various projects associated, according to the roofing survey. So, we did E.B. Morse. That was a large expenditure last year. A little bit of what's being done this summer will be going to Sanders. Apparently there's some supply chain issues with the particular material that's on that building that is different from any other building that we have. I was not aware of that. We won't have that until the following year, so that's why the $1.3 million essentially is what it would take to finish Sanders. I think there's going to be about $250,000 worth of work at Sanders on the roof.
While you at Sanders, are they gonna ever get their lab?
That's not included in this capital budget. I believe that is.
When will that come?
It's not in general fund.
Yes, we're definitely getting closer to that happening, and so we are awaiting the final drawings for that. We have submitted all of that, and so once we receive that and are able to approve it, then we'll continue to move forward. So we're still on track for getting that completed. So I'm not exactly sure when we will break ground yet, but I'll definitely keep you all posted as soon as I get additional information regarding that process.
Now, it's funded from a previous bond issue already?
Through ESSER, yes.
Yeah, so the reason we include this, the board has to vote on the resolution when we do the bond resolution later. And part of that resolution will include this schedule. And so that's why we include it with this, to go ahead and get the stamp on it before we enter that process, because that's done kind of over the summer and into August, because that bond sale will probably occur late August. So most of the other items besides the big big roofing items, those are things that we run into every year, in terms of just like there's always something that we have to end up upgrading for a safety reason. There's always like significant, a little more than repair type work to be done. The one item that we did break out that is of interest probably to the board is that we budgeted specifically for metal detectors at the middle schools. We were able to utilize, or we are utilizing some other categories funds in the current year to go ahead and do the high school, but we broke it out separately in the budget for the upcoming year to go ahead and get those metal detectors in every middle school.
All right, a couple of questions. You said the Sanders Middle School and the roof replacement was, that was generated from a roof study that you did. The facility study that's going on currently, or that you're hoping to complete quickly, is that type of information in that study as well, or is it focused more on students and space and things of that nature versus the actual quality of the facility?
Since we had just had this roofing study done, we shared that study with them, so they were able to wrap that into their study instead of having to do it too. But they'll probably also be looking at some of that information, but theirs mainly space, facilities, what's needed. But they are going to give us a to-do list on all of our facilities too.
Okay. Metal detectors, have we ordered the one for the high school, or are we just putting them at one door for each of the schools? Like,
We have ordered them for the high school, and so far that's the only school where we've placed an order. We're still going through the process with the safety audits as well. And the way from what has already taken place with the safety audit, there will be 4 doors that will have to do some reconfiguration as far as the entrance for the school, and those will be those 4 locations where we will direct traffic throughout the school.
and
So
that's
that was
at the high school?
Yes.
Okay. Is what we're going with similar to what, I know Dr. Harris had visited one of the school, Burns maybe? I can't recall. He was visiting one school and seeing how that worked. Is that what you decided to move forward with?
It's very similar technology, but it is a little bit different system. We're getting 3 to 4 devices for the price of 1, and they wanted you to lease agree and not actually own them. And so you would actually only have them for 3 to 4 years until the software, and then it would be, so they were actually lease agreeing for like $20,000 to $22,000 a piece per year as the lease agreement. So we're getting 4 for about that price of leasing for 1 year for all those. So we're kind of looking at the different ways and looking at flow for traffic and that kind of stuff. So looking at 1 in the L building, 2 in Commons, 1 front, 1 back, and 1 tech building.
And will it cover, when you say a door, will it cover more than, say, the front entrance into Commons at the high school? Will it cover that entire area? Is that just 1, or
No.
is it gonna be more
It's
narrow?
1 that's about, I think 3 feet wide, so you could flow through it, but they say you can run roughly 500 people through there in 20, 30 minutes. So it's not really going to be a slowdown once you get the process set up, and having 4 different doors kind of coming in, only 1,500 kids, then you can kind of model, kind of make that happen. It is one thing that they would have to have a table beside it. They would lay their laptop out, grab it on the other side so it doesn't hit on the laptop every time they walk through. So that'll just be a process we get our kids used to doing as they come and go through or actually come into the building. And these are very transportable. They weigh about 25 pounds. They run off of drill battery packs. They hold 2 of those. We could easily take them down to the football field, move them into the gym for ball games, graduations, whatever. So they're very portable whenever they're set up.
And just current staff would man those in the mornings, I guess, or
Yeah,
throughout the day?
that was something that once we actually come into the training on it, they would actually come in and talk to us about setup, where it needs to be, how many people you need to be running. They say about 10% get hit to be searched, not really searched, but kind of figure out what's making the alarm go off. So they said anywhere from 5 to 10% is who you're actually doing, and they said it's pretty quick flow.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. When we come back, can you answer who the last time we did roofing at high school? Because you've heard it before, it was expensive before. And now, we're gonna be doing this, get this kind of money every 5, 6 years.
The only thing that's been done, that's currently in the works at the high school is the gym. That's the The entire gym building is being redone, and that's with the last bond issue. That was the biggest area of need at that facility. From what I understand, and I don't actually have the roofing study, Dr. Harris works with the consultant on that, but it was about a $4 million job to do the work that needs to be done. Or the next scheduled work, you know, I mean, we know we have some issues there. We always have. Since that building was constructed, it's had issues. So, but the next scheduled roof replacement would be, district-wide would be to do the high school pod system, and that's gonna cost about $4 million. Well, obviously with, I mean, in an entire year, we got $3.3 million to work with, so that's not gonna get done in 1 year. But the roofing plan provides like a year by year, this is the next step, knowing what we can sort of afford to do, and if we had additional funds available, we could pull in and maybe accelerate that schedule a bit. But for the most part, we're just trying to, you know, we're spending a couple $1 million a year on roofing. So it would, if the high school pod system may take us 2 separate years by itself.
So were you asking when was the last time one was done?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well,
As far as a roof.
I don't know the
I
answer
knew
to
about
that.
the gym.
Yeah.
That was when about the previous year. When I recorded it. That basketball game, how it was raining in the gym.
Well,
I think you on the board.
I saw a video of a garbage can being asked to catch a tremendous amount of water. And then, you know, you run into, especially when you're you got the gym and the hardwood floors there, you run into a roofing problem. It's not just a roofing problem. If it messes up the floor, you've got a flooring problem. So,
Could have a molding problem and stuff.
absolutely.
Yeah,
So
that's what I
but
saw
that's
before.
that's being done. That should be getting done this summer. I believe that was part of the last bond issue that was in the schedule last year. And as far as I know, that'll be completed. It's already scheduled. This other work the work on this list will probably fall next summer. That's usually when that work's performed, just because that's when the kids aren't there, at least not in the numbers that we experienced during the year.
I know we're about to hit our mark on time, but I did have a question. One of the things I asked in our last budget meeting was, in talking to the schools and the district office, you know, is there opportunities anywhere to consolidate roles, to be more efficient in certain areas that would help with the budget?
We've actually had those conversations, and as we're trying to definitely protect the classroom roles, we're
Right.
definitely looking at other roles to see if there's any way, and we've talked about it as far as the departments are looking at ways that they maybe do that, and if there are other positions within the school as well. So that's an ongoing conversation to see if there's some opportunities to do that, and if there's any feedback on anything specifically that you all may like have questions about or suggestions, definitely would love to hear that as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lawless, do you
That's
have
all I have,
any
Ms.
additional
Wilson.
information? Dr. Thomas?
No.
Board, you guys have any more questions or?
Stuff down there that don't do it.
We got a couple minutes if you have something there.
I think, I'm not gonna have my paper at home on the table, but I think that's right. 'Cause I'm just going through it.
If you come up with any additional questions, I'll be glad to.
I made my
I'll
own
ask
copy.
just one on your categories here or whatever. The terminal leave, what is, I see that and there's a lot of zeros, but
wondered
there's one or
that
two.
too.
That sounds awful ominous.
That's a
It
required
does.
schedule for every school district, so if there's a zero, it's something we don't do.
Okay. But what is terminal leave? It sounds.
It's what it sounds like. It's for paying someone who's terminally ill. I don't. And it's a
Well,
zero.
it's kind of, it's in the,
It's intermittent on all, but it's
Yeah.
on page 52 under instruction, kind of about a quarter of a way down the page.
it's under each one of them, kind of.
I don't. Do you have that? You
The
do have it.
comparison to the last budget and the actual spent.
It's right here, it's
Mhm.
right under
123 orders, physically handicapped, salaries, terminal leave.
And And one of them has
It's
a number
category
in it.
140, yes, 140, and there was one that had something in it. I
Mhm.
didn't know if it was long-term illness or,
I'd have to look back and see what was, if it's something that we
It's
utilize,
kinda
I'd
on
have to
all
look
of
and see
them,
the
career and
specifics of it.
technology, high school, all of them.
the only one that had an actual spend was under the high school programs. So that's-
The high school programs captured, and keep in mind that that's the most recently completed fiscal year. And the budget that it's compared to is the continuing resolution budget, which means it's a 2-year-old budget when it
Yeah.
when it operated,
Whatever.
when we're operating under it anyway. So that was a year that's really hard to analyze. But a significant thing that happened under function of high school programs was when we paid out the retention bonuses, they all got coded to a single salary line item, 100, 114, high school 110. And so it got categorized under that function, but it was a lot of that, some of that was not high school related. That it just got lumped in there because it was a identifiable line item.
Yeah, but that doesn't really answer the question on what is terminal leave.
Yeah,
I
what
don't
is
know the
140?
answer to that. I'd have to look back and see what was paid.
Most of
And
it
it could-
zeros, but
Yeah. Do you have any clue, Renee, what that?
sounds like we all need a little lesson on what budget is, what budget categorization, I mean, is not.
Yeah, that one.
And so, you know, if you kind of gave a little primer for that, but that certainly helps.
That primer is something that I need to deliver to a lot of districts.
Sounds like, yeah. And it would help us, and maybe we'd have fewer questions.
I thought that you would benefit from the primer.
Yes, Ms. Wells.
Terminal leave pay is included in the last salary check, significantly inflating some people's average pay. For example, if an administrator earns $100,000 a year, and in the last year earns an extra $100,000 in terminal pay, the average salary used to compute his or her pension goes up by 20%. That's what I just Googled online and looked on it.
Oh, but in terms of what we
Thank
actually
you.
spent it for, what was the amount?
This one was, it was in the high school
90
program.
days or something.
That may be
90.
how they classified the sick over 90.
Yeah, there's
You know, it's like- but I'd have to-
9,355.
I mean, you were looking at $30 million of salaries. I can't tell you where that 9,000.
But we'll find out the
specifically,
information
but I can
and
get
get
you
that
Yeah,
to
I was
you.
just curious on
Yeah,
that.
that one will be easy enough to identify.
I mean, it's kind of a sub under 100. I wonder why it was broken out that way.
But
Yeah.
you got one under preschool handicap, self-contained 3 and 4-year-olds. Terminal leave paid was $52,888.
Well, that's significant.
What page
It
is
says
it on
pay
there?
to employees who
54.
resign, retire, or otherwise terminate their employment.
But there's a 0 under salary, so that might have that might just be the wrong line.
It could be. We spot errors and we correct errors as we go. But we've got 900 people getting paid, some of them
Just like
twice
the
a
extra
month,
they
so
give.
most of them twice a month.
Then you got one under autism that paid out $28,168 on that line.
That sounds like it's a,
Benefit.
That sounds weird.
that doesn't, I don't have that, I didn't bring that report with me, so I don't.
Okay.
But I'll
Anyone
clarify that
else?
for you, I don't mind, not at all.
Mr. Carpenter, you good? You got any questions? Mr. Varner? Mr. Patterson?
No, we're good.
Ms. Ware?
Fine,
We're
yeah.
all good? Okay. Well, we can adjourn if we can have a motion to do that.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Raise your hand. Aye. That's unanimous. We're adjourned.